Hello, this is Head to Head on UATV and I'm Ales Gardyuk. Today we're talking about Ukraine's economy, which continues to grow due to reforms. But with a sluggish pace of only 2% of a year, we are progressing like a turtle. International partners have been quick to point out the main obstacles. These are corruption and the failure of judicial institutions to deliver justice. On the other hand, Ukraine is taking decisive steps to change its economic, educational and healthcare sectors. So, to provide an assessment of the scope and quality of reforms in Ukraine, we welcome to the studio Ivan Miklosh, Slovakia's former Deputy Prime Minister and Finance Minister. Currently, he is the Chief Economic Advisor to Ukrainian Prime Minister and Chairman of the Strategic Advisory Group for Support of Ukrainian Reforms. Hello, and thank you for being with us today.
Thank you.
So, Ukraine started a long process with all the reforms since the victory in Euromaidan in the Revolution of Dignity. In your opinion, how successful has Ukraine been so far within these 4 years?
Yeah, that's the question, if the glass is half full or half empty.
True.
I think on one side it was done for the first time in Ukrainian history. Now, after Euromaidan, system is changing towards functioning market economy and normal parliamentary democracy, which means this is very good news. That it was done a lot in some areas like macroeconomic stabilization, like reducing fiscal deficit, like cleaning banking sector, stabilizing currency. Reducing inflation. It was done really a lot for the first time in history. Some areas were started, reforms were started, like deregulation, like liberalization, which is very important, like healthcare and education, which you have mentioned also. A pension reform, which is very important, very difficult reform in every country, was done. It's very good reform.
But it has been very controversial in Ukraine, and the IMF and the World Bank have expressed their concerns about pension reform. What can you say about it?
You know, every reform is controversial. Every real reform is controversial.
Okay.
There are no controversies.
So we shouldn't expect the calm reform process.
No, there are no controversies only if there are no reforms. Then. Okay. No change, no controversies. But of course, if you are changing the system, then of course it creates a lot of controversies. For instance, because people are in general afraid from new situations which they don't know. But not only, also because those who are profiting from today's deformed system, they are fighting against the change because, of course, there are a lot of profits from today's system, which means controversy is not the problem.
But you see the pension reform as a plus, basically, for Ukraine.
I see pension reform as a very big plus. Of course, I'm not saying that there are not some disputable things which are, of course, also discussed by IMF. For instance, if those system is motivating enough those low-income people to work. If you have very small difference between low pensions and social contributions which they are receiving, this is one of the questions. Then sustainability from point of view of these military pensions, but they are in comparison with the whole systemic change which was done. There are minor things, which means, but kind of general assessment is that it was done a lot for the first time. On the other side, we are still not in the point of irreversibility, which means it is necessary to do much more. And unfortunately, in some areas, progress is still insufficient.
What areas?
Especially there are areas which are inevitable precondition for higher economic growth. Because as it was said, for this year, we expect growth around 3%, which is not bad. But if you compare with global growth, this year will be 3.9%.
But actually, in one of your articles, you said, and I want to quote you, that this country, Ukraine, has the potential for a confident economic growth of 6 to 7% per year minimum. And what do we need for that? Exactly,
and very important, sustainable growth.
Sustainable growth.
Because, you know, sustainable growth. For this, there are more preconditions, but the most important is that investment ratio to GDP has to significantly increase, will have to significantly increase. Today, Ukrainian investment ratio to GDP is 15%. Investment means also public investment, private investment, domestic investment, foreign investment.
But in Ukraine, public investment do not exist almost, right?
No, they exist, but they're not sufficient. But important is that only source which can really quickly increase this ratio for the necessity level are foreign direct investment. And we are speaking about approximately $10 billion yearly, because today we have 15%. To increase to 25%, it means $10 billion more.
But how can we attract these foreign investors?
Three most important preconditions are there: property right protection and law enforcement and everything connected with this. That's the reason why anti-corruption court is so important also for investment, because it will bring signal that really things are changing. There are some other positive changes. Judicial reform started 1 year ago, and so that is going very slowly. Then second is privatization. In privatization, we have no progress, and we have dozens of state-owned companies which can attract strategic, serious investors if they will be privatized by transparent, normal international tenders, which hopefully will start now after new law was adopted. And third one is land market reform, which is another huge potential for development and growth.
To abolish the moratorium, you mean?
Yeah, to cancel moratorium and to open market with the land. And then fourth could be demonopolization and deregulation, especially in energy sector, to create conditions for open this sector for investment, also from abroad, but not only, but also from abroad. If these preconditions are fulfilled, I'm confident that Ukrainian growth can be higher and sustainable.
But Ukrainian officials, they develop this kind of rhetoric that they don't want to let foreign investors buy Ukrainian agricultural land. And we know that in European Union it is a very common practice. What could be your recommendations?
Yeah, firstly, it is understandable, but because this is a sensitive question everywhere. And of course, Ukrainian land is one of the best, if not the best, in Europe, which means it is possible to understand. In some countries, there was no restriction for foreigners and nothing bad happened, it is necessary to say. But okay, I can understand these fears and problems. And for instance, in Slovakia, what we did in Slovakia, that we had some limitation for foreigners to buy. If foreigners wanted to buy land, they had to create legal company, legal personality in Slovakia, and then only this company could buy land. What was proposed by government of Vladimir Hrojsman was to have some transition period, few years during which it will be impossible for foreigners to buy land. Only Ukrainians will be able to buy land, and it will be also a limitation for legal persons and physical persons not to allow to oligarchs to buy everything, yeah? Which means there are possibilities, and the government thought about this and implemented this kind of safeguards for the limiting the danger, political danger connected with this.
So Ukrainians would be like different owners and different distributors of the agricultural land to foreign investors.
We are even speaking about 7 million owners who are now private owners of 28 million hectares of the land, because those 7 million people are owners, and they as owners cannot sell this land, which is, I'm sure, that it is anti-constitutional.
And that's the reason that the price for rent is very low, basically.
Exactly.
Because there is
Ukraine has one of the best land, and price for renting, because renting is only possibility what these owners can do with this land. And then price is just small, much smaller than, for instance, in Poland or in other countries, in Slovakia.
And speaking of another issue of law enforcement, you said that this is also one of the main obstacles for foreign investors. And since you were Minister of Finance in Slovakia, here in Ukraine, the Ukrainian government wants to establish the National Bureau of Financial Investigation, or the Financial Police, which would be subordinated to the Ministry of Finance. And currently there are 3 bills submitted to the parliament. What are your thoughts on these bills, and which one probably would you choose?
Yeah.
If you could vote?
You know, this problem is very nicely characterized why reforms are not going such smoothly and quickly as it could be. Because it is abnormal. It is abnormal that not only government but also coalition MPs are proposing some kind of alternative, competitive proposals. It was the reason why tax reform, which was prepared by former Minister Jaresko, was not passed because it was another alternative proposal, which was very populistic and very irresponsible. And finally, no one was passed. And now it is very similar situation. It is proposal of the new, this financial police, let's say, from the which was prepared by Ministry of Finance and approved by government. It's governmental proposal, which is very good. But there is an alternative proposal for group of coalition MPs, and it's strange, coalition MPs.
Yeah, there are even two alternative proposals.
Even two. Yeah. And this is coalition government. And then finally, and speaking about content, I think the government proposal is much better. You know why? Because it is changing this philosophy of the financial police from the investigation and punishment institution to more analytical institution, which is analyzing where are the biggest systemic problems and then investigating these problems and the reasons of this problem.
And conducting searches and
these alternative proposals are more based on punishment, which is exactly what old financial police did. Then it is misused for high corruption and so on and so on. Which means this is really bad situation that we have this kind of competition. If opposition is proposing alternative proposals to coalition government proposals, then it is normal. But normally these opposition proposals have no chance to be approved because normally opposition has no majority in the parliament. And this is one of the problem here that government doesn't have sufficient support in parliament.
Speaking of this governmental proposal, there is one controversy from the critics. They point out that the new established institution would be subordinate to the President Petro Poroshenko because of the dismissal procedure of the head of the institution. What could be your recommendations about that? Is it good for the financial police to be subordinate to the President?
It is again illustrating much deeper problem. And this is the problem that executive power, which is very important, executive power in Ukraine is divided between president and government. And this is neither presidential nor parliamentarian system. And this is very bad because in principle, and it is not about persons, it is not if it is President Poroshenko or Prime Minister Groysman, in principle. It cannot work effectively. It has to be either presidential or parliamentarian, which means we need to have clear who is responsible for executive power. Because, for instance, now, financial police, for collecting money, public money, taxes and so on, for fighting against financial fraud and crime, is the responsibility of the government and Ministry of Finance, which has to collect as much as possible money. Which means normal is if also Ministry of Finance has a responsibility and also power to appoint, or government, on proposal of Ministry of Finance. Because if responsibility is in one person or institution and power is in another institution, it simply cannot work. It cannot work. And this is one of the very deep and big problems of the Ukrainian constitutional system.
Well,
which means my proposal in this concrete area could be that it has to be this responsibility on government or on Ministry of Finance, or government on the proposal of Finance Minister.
I get your opinion. Well, all Ukraine's economy and Ukrainian situation now are dependent on the loans from the IMF, and currently, the group from the IMF is working in Ukraine. So what is your forecast? Are we getting the next tranche of money in spite of all the scandals with the reforming?
I hope that Ukraine will receive this tranche, because it is necessary to say that without receiving this tranche in this year, hopefully somewhere in mid of this year, Ukraine will have serious problem cover its debt commitments. And then, of course, it can create a lot of troubles on the market, economic and social troubles, and so on. Which means, because that commitment for and debt service for this year and next year is relatively high, and without money from IMF, it will be very difficult to borrow additional money on the market.
Of course. Well, thank you so much for your opinion, for your useful recommendations, and for this conversation as well.
Thank you.
That was Ivan Miklosh, Chief Economic Advisor to Ukrainian Prime Minister and Chairman of the Strategic Advisory Group for Support of Ukrainian Reforms. Thank you for watching Head to Head. I'm Ales Gardyuk. Goodbye.